It has to be self-care, and do not think of self-care as being egotistical. I hear that all the time. People think, oh, well, isn't that going to be egotistical? No, you have to take care of yourself in order to be healthy and happy and then care for others.
Hello, and welcome to the Stroke It podcast. I'm Alday Townsend, your host. This podcast is for individuals that are wanting to grow personally and professionally. The podcast is going to offer mindset shifts, personal experiences from myself and guest. We're also going to provide some great resources, tools, and direction for navigating life. The goal is to inspire you and encourage you to take ownership of your life and begin living it completely fully today. Let's get to stroking it. Hello and welcome. I'm Alday Townsend, your host. I'm really excited here to have Deborah Charnes. She is a kind-spirited woman. I'm excited for her to share her journey with you. We are going to be talking about taking care of yourself. She's a recent grandmother as well. So she's going to be talking about the importance of new moms, supporting them, loving them, and providing the support that they need. Obviously, that can be at a really lonely time, but also a really, really exciting time too. So Deborah has been coaching people of all different ages with physical and emotional challenges, and she seeks to boost their mind, body, and spirit through simple techniques that can be practiced anywhere and at any time. Deborah, thank you so much for being on my podcast. I'm so grateful to have you here.
I am so happy to be here to join you and to share some of the things that I've learned along the way, because I'm not a spring chicken anymore.
Okay, so before we get started, I always think it's really, really important to share with the listeners what season of life that you're in and how did you get to where you are today? I know you have a book out as well, but give us the skinny on you. We want to be able to connect with you.
So even though I'm 66 years old, I would say I am in the springtime of my life because I feel as if I am all in bloom and I feel as if I'm my healthiest and my happiest. And much of that is because I finally have some work-life balance and I'm able to take care of myself finally. And that is what as a certified yoga therapist, I help others to help themselves. And people typically don't know what a certified yoga therapist is. And I say it's much more about therapy than yoga.
That's so true, as well as like you're laying there, like it's a lot of processing of the emotions and being still and with your own thoughts and your own feelings and emotions and everything. So that's awesome. I was exposed to yoga when I was going through a difficult time in my life. And I was like, there's no way I'll be able to sit there. There's no way I'll be able to do yoga or meditation. And those things were such life changing as well. So, all right. So tell me a little bit about your book. That way we can have a little bit better understanding of that.
Sure. Well, first of all, I have been in the communications business my entire life, marketing, communications, and writing. And I've been a long-time blogger, travel writer, and whatever. And I came from the corporate world where I worked 24/7, never had any time for myself. But I always was searching. And because I worked so hard at my corporate job, I also worked so hard to be able to find what I enjoyed as well. And that's why my entire life I've always relied on holistic therapies such as yoga, meditation, breath work. So my book, From the Boxing Ring to the Ashram, is basically a compilation of life lessons from a dozen of my gurus around the world. And they're on 4 different continents. And every chapter tells a little bit of their life story and a little bit of the challenges they face, because every single person faces loads of challenges. And then I share their wisdom and 5 easy tips from them. And then I give them a lot of research findings to back up what my gurus say. And then I give them a give it a try suggestion. And my idea with the book is that in 10 minutes a day, you really can make a difference to have a healthier and happier life. And the kinds of things that I talk about in my book, I consider it yoga therapy, but a lot of people may not realize it's yoga therapy, but some of it is sing every single day. Laugh every single day. Have gratitude every single day and take care of yourself every single day.
You're saying all those things and I'm shaking my head. I'm like, yes, yes, yes. And those seem like so simple. And I will say 100% that all of those things work, like in making yourself happier, more fulfilled as well. And like you're a better person, not only for yourself, but for other people in your life. That's a big, tall order for some people to actually incorporate into their life. So I would like to kind of go right into that and let's talk about how you encourage people to do that. I know that you talked about 4 different steps or 4 or 5 different things. So can we go kind of dive right into those and you give us some really great strategies to where we can enhance our life and really get out of that boxing ring and become happy and fulfilled and feel like you every single day?
Sure. Well, I just kind of opened up the book somewhat at random, somewhat not at random, because every chapter has 5 easy tips. And the chapter that I opened it to is from a chapter called Happiness Isn't a Big Bank Account. And what I first want to mention is I have studied, and my work is very much based on traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda. Ayurveda is the life science from India. And in Ayurveda, we talk about the stages of life and that middle age where you're workaholic is natural. And then when you get beyond, that's kind of like the golden years where it's more about wisdom and sharing. And so the title of this chapter is Happiness Isn't a Big Bank Account, because so many of us are in that middle stage of our life most of our lives. I started working when I was 16 years old. I'm still working, but I'm not focused as much, of course, on working my tail off. So anyway, the 5 easy tips from this chapter are: love to attract love. True wealth is to love and be loved. Love life, love yourself, love humanity, love other species, love the planet. Number 2, the other ones, I'm not going to go into them, just the titles. Engage your God-given gifts with a mindset of gratitude in service to others. 3, earn with integrity and spend with compassion. 4, recognize the higher power behind your success and share the credit with others. And 5, be a nonconformist. But what he means by this is embrace the evolved spiritual culture of loving people and using things to facilitate that love.
I love that. Not to use the word love again, but I do love that. And I love that you've incorporated that. So it's the month of February when we're recording this. And so for every single month, I have like basically a to-do list on my refrigerator and I pick a word for the year or a word for the month. And my word this month obviously is love, but a lot of it had to do with just like loving myself, love what I'm doing, love the journey, love the action that I'm doing to make things happen. Like just incorporating that love into the everyday activity that I'm doing. And I feel more fulfilled and I feel like I'm sharing more love and I'm giving more love to myself and to other people by just incorporating that word into my life as well. So I think that's really, really important that you're bringing that into there. And then the gratitude, so many people go through the day complaining or just in a negative mindset where if they just sat back and gave gratitude and took in everything that they have available at their fingertips or the people they come in contact with or the work they get to do, they would just be so much happier. So, well, thank you for sharing that.
And I do have an entire chapter in my book that's based on gratitude. And of course, I have a gratitude practice. And every night before I go to bed, there are several different prompts. And sometimes it can be something so simple or, not really earth-shattering. Like, I'm thankful for my lunch today, or I'm thankful for my dentist, or I'm thankful for the sunny day. It really is so important. And again, in my book, I talk about research findings that support why it is so important. And I also wanted to mention the month of February, my birthday. People always say, "Oh, you Valentine's Day baby." I never liked being a Valentine's Day baby. And I think the reason why is because in our society, too much of it is focused on Cupid and romantic love. I've spent and I've lived in Mexico and South America and Central America. And in South America, where my daughter was born, it's called El Día del Amor y la Amistad, the Day of Love and Friendship. And I like that term for it so much more. Unfortunately, I feel that in our culture, so much of it is, kind of like the Disney, love stories, and we need to love everything. But what is so difficult sometimes is to love ourselves and to take care of ourselves.
Right. So, for the individuals that are listening, maybe they're running a household, they're running a company, and they're running all over the place, and to think about caring or loving themselves, they all know they need to do it. They've all heard this before, that if they love themselves and fill their cup up, they're going to be better for themselves and for other people. However, it's overwhelming. They can't find the time. They're not willing to make themselves the priority. They find it hard to commit to themselves. So if you were to coach them or guide them, how would you encourage them or get them to where they're actually loving themselves first?
Well, the first thing I would suggest is it can just be in 10-minute increments and, every day. So even if you go to the bathroom and you go to the bathroom to do your business, but while you're there, maybe you sing while you're in the bathroom. Or what I did when I was working and when things were too stressful, sometimes, again, I would just be at my computer, close my eyes, and take in some deep breaths. We have to find the time to step back from the chaos that is surrounding us, and we will be stronger that way. The other suggestion I have, which for some people can seem radical, and I will tell you, it took me about 3 or 4 years before I did it myself, is the concept of a secular Sabbath or a digital disconnect. And it was actually my Ayurvedic doctor that told me I needed to disconnect once a week. And I'm like, yeah. And this was after I'd left the corporate world. But even after I'd left the corporate world, I had like 5 different businesses, and I'm juggling so much, even though I'd already left the corporate world. And it was actually right before COVID that I decided to do my weekly digital disconnect. And then, of course, COVID hit, and I started doing 3 days of digital disconnects. And with COVID, while we all recognize all the horrendous problems and the deaths due to COVID, because I try to focus on the positive, I really believe that for me, it was so grounding and so helpful for introspection. And I think for many other people as well, because it totally shifted what we were doing. And today, many of the people that used to be driving everywhere, and I used to, drive all over my county for an hour here, hour there, everywhere. And then, of course, I would work morning, evening, afternoon, middle of the night. And so with COVID, there was like a mandatory disconnect, and when I say disconnect, of course, there was a greater connect to Zoom, which also helped us from a social aspect. We were able to connect with people that we care about. But there, ages ago, I was taught about cocooning and the concept of cocooning. And what COVID forced us to do was cocoon a bit.
So I've never heard the terminology of cocooning. I will comment about COVID. I do believe when COVID happened, it was an opportunity for us to stop, acknowledge what was super, super important in our lives, take ownership of our time, spend time with family, find time to do the things we always wanted to do, find hobbies, connect with family that we hadn't connected with in a very long time as well. So same thing with focusing on the positive. There were so many positive things that did come out of COVID as well. So when you talk about the digital disconnect, I try to do that. I literally on Sundays, I will just leave my phone in my room on my nightstand, and then I just go and do what I need to do. Sometimes I find myself going back in there to grab it, and it's super challenging because I'm like, oh, I'm thinking about this, or I wanted to text this person, or I want, it's so hard. So how do you do a digital disconnect for a period of time?
Well, what I say in my book is with everything, you have to adapt to your lifestyle and to your circumstances. And your lifestyle and circumstances are going to change all the time. What I do for myself still is, you take that secular Sabbath and, whether it's Saturday or Sunday, whatever you choose. But the way that I do it is if I'm catching a plane on Saturday, I catch a plane on Saturday, and then maybe Sunday will be my day of rest, or maybe it'll be Monday. So I'm not so rigid that it has to be, from sundown one day to sundown the next, because again, I recognize that sometimes there are just things you cannot shuffle with different obligations. And the most important thing, of course, is to do what is right for you. I chose for myself to not drive because, again, I was driving so much before. And that was, again, one of the things that I loved about COVID is that I was only driving to the grocery store and that was about it. And then I was just walking around my neighborhood every day, and it was just so much more enjoyable. So I try actually to only drive a couple times a week now.
Really?
But now that is not part of my digital disconnect, but I extrapolate. And so I recognize how it is so important for me, especially considering how much mileage I used to do all the time. So that's why I say it's important that you tailor it to what's right for you. And I do mention in my book, I mention Tiffany Shlain, who wrote a book called 24/6. And I highly recommend that book as well. And she talks again about how she, as a prominent film maker, is much more efficient and gets so much more done in 6 days than if she were working 7. But her way of having that disconnect is she doesn't use any devices, electronic devices, but she does use a phone line, the landlines.
What's a landline?
Exactly.
No, I'm just kidding. I totally had a landline growing up.
But I haven't had a landline for, I don't know, 15 years. And so many people now don't have a landline. But again, that's why I say it's important to tailor it to what is right for you. And I want to quote another, I'm a major reader, and another author who I love is Anne Lamott. And she says, everything works if you reboot it. And she says, sometimes we need to, and I'm not saying this in her specific words, but she basically says, sometimes we need to reboot ourselves. We need to disconnect and then plug back in.
What 100%. I just told my husband, I said, let's go to the beach and watch the sunset tonight because I really need to disconnect from the lights, from the camera, from my phone, from the technology, and really just ground myself and go put my feet in the sand, maybe my feet in the water, maybe do a cold plunge. I don't know what I need, but I do know I need to disconnect. And for years, I myself too was on the hamster wheel and I went nonstop, nonstop. And it took something major in my life to pull me off that hamster wheel to figure out that I needed to have balance and I needed to have rest in my life and I needed to create time for myself and create time for myself that included rest where I didn't feel guilty. Like my parents raised us where we were just working all the time and our value was based on our work ethic and there was no rest. If we wanted to take a nap or we wanted to sit down and watch a movie, we were considered lazy. And so I grew up not being able to rest and feeling very guilty about it till recently when I just finally said enough is enough. My body can only go for so long. And if I don't take care of it and I don't rest, which my husband will still say that I do not rest, but I do rest way more than I used to. Just so much value in resetting and recharging your body in your mind as well. So I think a lot of times we just get so wrapped up in the to-dos and all of the goals and the accomplishments and the deadlines and, creating this amazing life, but sometimes we forget to live it, embrace it, and enjoy the journey as well.
And what we say a lot of times in my world, in terms of my world of yoga and meditation, is our society is about do, do, do. And we need to be, and not do.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay. Well, speaking of doing things and, taking in all this self-care, and I want to dive into the part where we want to take care of our family members and provide support. And I know that you're a new Grammy. Congratulations. When did your daughter give birth?
January 21st.
Oh, my birthday's January 31st. So that's awesome. And where does your daughter live?
Well, so my daughter has been living in Austin for, I don't know how many years, maybe 10 years or more. I was living elsewhere in Texas. And so I moved to Austin in November in anticipation of the baby being born so that I would be able to help her and her husband out more and, of course, take care of the baby more.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Well, I don't have children, but all my friends do. And I also own a child-based business. And my mother was an amazing mother. And I don't know how they do it all. And I just always, one of the reasons I did not want to have children is I didn't want to do it all. I didn't think I was capable of doing it all. And it exhausted me to think about it. So let's talk about how you support your daughter and how important it is for new moms to have the support system, the love and the care, but also just like the extra hands as well.
Sure. Well, first I want to mention that I can totally relate to what you're saying. I was living in Chicago working crazy hours when my husband and I decided to have a child. And when I was about, I don't know, maybe 9 weeks pregnant, it must have been, I don't remember when, but in my first trimester, we moved to South America. And I knew that there was no way that I could have kept my old job back then and been pregnant and had the baby. Things have progressed in some workplaces. But I still think it's crazy that in the United States, we don't have any federal laws that guarantee maternity or paternity leave, such as in Canada or in many European countries where it's very common. So I recognize that some companies do have very ample paternity leave as well. my husband never had any paternity leave. And so I took a bus to the hospital, and then he, like, right around when he knew the baby was going to be born, he came. And then I don't know if he had that next day off, but then the following day he had to go back to work. And that was very common. And again, this was not in the United States, but in the United States, that was very common in that era as well. So fortunately now, more people have maternity and paternity leave, but I still don't understand how women can go back to work so soon when the baby is so tiny. And then, of course, if they have other children. And I was watching some I Love Lucy reruns and kind of seeing how child raising was back then. And one of the things that I was finding, is that back in the day of I Love Lucy, women were in the hospital for about a week when they gave birth. Well, their husbands had to go to work. And what about if they had other children at home? People had to have a network of support system. And again, that was one of the reasons why we went to South America when I was pregnant, because we knew that there would be more of familial support system where people live closer together to their family. Whereas in the United States, it's so common that people are spread out, from one end of the country to another. And it's very difficult. What I do think is good, though, is that, at least from what I've seen from how my daughter was preparing, is that they do tell the moms to be and the new moms that they have to have time for themselves. They also tell them that they have to, just kind of stay at home and rest and have people help you. Now the entire concept of a doula is common, and the doulas are not just there when the child is born. They are there to help you afterwards, should you choose. They can be there before to choose. And so there are support systems that people can tap into, and it is so important to have those support systems in place.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And I know a lot of my friends that have had children, they've had some parents help them for like the first week or two. The mom will fly in, where it's really exciting for the newborn, and then they leave. And then it's like that's when they're really exhausted because like they're off the high of having the baby. That's when they're really, really exhausted and it's all sinking in. I think that their entire life has changed. But there is a fair share of them too that like are resistant to the help and the support. And they want to like do it all and have it all and be in that stance of they don't need the help. So how would you speak to the listeners today if there are women that are either pregnant or recent moms, or maybe it's a friend of a new mom? How would you encourage them to be present and support?
To me, that all goes back to a little bit of what I do. And, I've been leading these First Love Yourself workshops for about 10 years. And it's not just about self-love, it's about self-care. And much of self-care is prioritization. It can be very difficult for a lot of us to say no. We want to think that we're super women, and we don't want to accept help.
Yeah, so they do. Yes. And even like some of my mom friends that are, older that have 3 kids, or their kids are, old enough to help around the house, or even like some of the friends that their grandparents live locally, like they want to be part of their lives. And there's a lot of resistance of letting them go and stay at the grandparents' house because it doesn't have the technology and they don't have all the things that they need. When in actuality, they really don't need the technology. They don't need all the games. They really need to be with their grandparents to learn about the history, their heritage, where they came from, the social skills, and to create that bond of that family. And I think a lot of times it's like they forget that their parents raised them and that's how they got to where they are today. So, if you are listening and you do have children and if you do have family nearby, I know it's very odd in this culture to like just let them go and stay there. Like I grew up at my grandparents' house all the time. I have great memories and a very close connection with them. But I feel like this generation, like I'm in my 40s and the people that are raising children now are very skeptical of just having their parents be involved in the kid's life and take care of them as well. And I know it's very common in other countries as well. Actually, my mom is half Cuban, half Venezuelan. So they're all together all the time as well. And I was reading or watching the show How to Live to 100, and it speaks about the importance of being with your family and how people are happier, they're more fulfilled, and they live longer when they're surrounded by their family.
And I just want to mention that, even though I talk about self-love and self-care all the time, I'm the kind of person, I won't ask anybody for anything. My daughter, fortunately, is the kind of person that will. And so we had a number of really good conversations while she was pregnant about expectations and what she was going to want for me and how I'm not the kind of person who's going to, kind of say, oh, no, you're doing that all wrong. You have to do it my way. I was very respectful of how she wanted to raise her child. So we had those conversations in advance. And then I told her husband, because I knew my daughter wouldn't have a problem telling me what she needed. But I several times told her husband, it's very important that you need to tell me also what you need me to do for you.
And was he able to communicate that to you?
He does now, yes. But again, we knew that it wasn't going to be natural for him like it would have been for my daughter. And so that's why we had, some of those discussions in advance, because I wanted to be sure that, again, because I know I won't ask anybody for anything.
I wanted to add, as you're talking about this, having these conversations in advance of like what your needs are, how you want to care for your child, how I can support you. I feel like a lot of this goes into even other relationships as well, whether you're working with someone in a professional setting, whether you're talking about that with your spouse, like as you're dating before you get married as well. Like, these are my needs. This is my approach. This is how I operate. This could be really beneficial, and vice versa. I think those conversations are super important. Do you have some of that information in your book that really talks about communicating your needs?
I don't. That's not really what I talk about. But something that I did want to mention that goes back to the new moms is that one of my chapters features a neuroscientist who's affiliated with Harvard Medical School. And he has been researching yoga and the brain for a very long time, like 30 years. And the chapter is basically about yoga for depression, anxiety, and PTSD. And the statistics about the women who have postpartum depression is so high. And so, we need to do as much as we can to be there for them. And if you have postpartum depression, you're most likely not going to say, hey, I need this help.
Are there signs that we could look for that those individuals may have so that we are aware that they are dealing with postpartum?
I think it's different with everybody. And what I talk about in my book is that there are different levels. Of course, there's the baby blues. And so it's a much higher percentage of women will have the baby blues, which is not, clinical depression. And so it's one thing to have the baby blues. Baby blues will come and go. Maybe it's like, oh my God, I can't even go to the bathroom, right? Because I can't leave my baby alone. So maybe that can cause the baby blues or minor triggers. But again, we just have to recognize that when a woman is pregnant, and then when she gives birth, and then postpartum, there are so many hormonal changes. And I'm also trained in yoga for prenatal and for postpartum. And one of the things that I was shocked about in terms of how long it takes for your body to get back to normal, and of course, hormones as well. But the kidneys, for example, it takes, I think, 6 to 9 months after delivery for the kidneys to get back to normal. Whereas other things get back to normal, in a couple of weeks. But in reality, when those hormones shift so quickly, that's when the emotions also, it can be harder for the emotions.
Yeah, it sounds like a roller coaster. It could be like a roller coaster if you don't have the right support or just your head on your shoulder if you're not taking care of yourself, which is so, so important. I know that's the work that you're conveying here today of taking care of yourself and loving yourself and creating that time. So, all right. So I want to move on from the baby chatter to the bedroom chatter. And so we'll keep it PG since we're talking about babies and talking about pleasuring yourself and taking care of yourself to where you feel great as well. And we don't mean anything on the bed, but we're talking about in the bedroom, creating a really great space for you to feel loved and feel emotionally pleased as well. So, if you could dive in and give us some really great tips or tools that we can incorporate into the bedroom that would spark our inner happiness and joy.
Well, first of all, I want to mention that insomnia is so common. And what a lot of people don't recognize, because they think, oh my God, how come I can't sleep? I'm waking up all the time. We have sleep cycles. So it's normal to wake up maybe every hour, but ideally you fall asleep right away. So what I want to mention about bedroom is that one of the things we need to look at is getting ready for sleep. And there are all different things that you can do to get yourself ready to sleep. One of the things I would recommend is no devices. You turn off your TV, you turn off your smartphone. I will say what a device that I love, and I've got it right here, if I can pull it over, is a little sound machine. So this is a device that I highly recommend because you can put the sound of thunder, ocean, brook, summer night, rain, white noise. And in fact, even for babies, they recommend this for babies to help them sleep longer. So a sound machine is beautiful. But there are so many other things you can do. I also hate bright lights at night. So I like candles. I love candles. And of course, you can have scented candles that smell really nice. I also have salt lamps in all of my rooms. And I ran an Airbnb until I moved to be closer to my daughter. And in all my Airbnb bedrooms, I had not only the sound machines, but I also had salt lamps for them. And then essential oils. There are specific essential oils that can help you relax, such as lavender or rose. And of course, you can always just use whatever feels nice. Another practice from Ayurveda, which I just led a workshop this weekend that was about bone health. And it was something that I demonstrated in my bone health workshop, but it's also great to help you sleep and to just relax you. And it's self-care. It's called Abhyanga, Abhyanga. And it's basically self-massage. It's very easy. You can use coconut oil, and you just focus in particular on your joints and kind of go around in a circular motion on your joints, on your elbows, your shoulders, your ankles, your knees. That's a beautiful practice. And we all need tactile attention. And there's nothing wrong with yourself, touching yourself. And the Abhyanga practice is, as I mentioned, it's also healthy for the bones. So it's beneficial on many different levels. The other thing that I like to do if I can't sleep well, or just in general, if I need to disconnect my brain from whatever may be going on outside, is breath work. So this would be, or it can be, in the bed. So you can just get in the bed, get in a comfortable position, and focus on the breath. And there are many different breathing techniques that I practice. And I do give some specific breathing technique samples and that I detail in my book, From the Boxing Ring to the Ashram. But breathing techniques are so important. And then there, again, in terms of, even though I say disconnect, aside from these sound machines, there are some beautiful sleep meditations that you can find on different apps. And my daughter had a very, very, very long labor. And she had beautiful guided meditations that were going throughout. And so they helped her to relax, and they also helped her to sleep, between the contractions and when it was necessary.
Awesome. I love all the things that you've listed. And I just want to reiterate some of them as well. As far as the salt lamps, I have them throughout my house. There's a lot of healing benefits to having the salt lamps. And I actually have one that's for your feet where you can put your feet on it as well, which is really, really beautiful. And I bought like a light illuminator for our room as well. But I went to Home Depot because same thing, I hate the bright light. I went to Home Depot and in the aisle, they have a light bulb that you can buy that's multicolored and it's with a remote control. So it has like 5 different settings as far as the brightness, but then it has all these different colors as well. I think I paid $13.99. It's in the lamp next to my bed. And then it also has just like your natural light as well. So if you want to read, but I've been putting that on before I go to sleep or just setting the ambiance in our room before we go in and all of that. And I love the idea of the essential oils. I use cedarwood because I heard that was really good for, calming the brain too. And, just incorporating a few of these things really do relax the mind and the body and the soul and get you into a deeper sleep as well. My husband and I sometimes will, we have a YouTube subscription, so we'll put on the YouTube the sleep videos as well with the really, really beautiful noise and beautiful sounds. And sometimes it'll keep me up a little bit later than I want it to because I'm just listening to the vibrations. But those are all really, really great tips for those that really want a deep sleep, but also then to kind of decompress from the day as well. So thank you for sharing all of those.
And I do, one of the women that I feature in my book is a Swami. And she taught me probably 20 years ago that the worst thing you can do before sleeping, and I'm talking about several hours before sleeping, is to watch TV. And now I will say, if you're going to watch PBS and if you're going to watch a ballet on PBS, that's fine. But, you're not going to watch crime scenes, or the news. Those are horrendous. So it's always better to turn, of course, off your devices, but reading, and especially spiritual and nurturing type of books, are good. And I do read all the time. So you're talking about your light bulb that I happen to have right here. This is a light bulb and it's pink here. And so when I put it in my lamp with the shade, it's bright enough that I can read, but it's not overpowering. It's still a duller, more soothing light. And that's what I use in my bedroom, this pink one, aside from, of course, the salt lamps.
Yeah, it creates a nice ambiance as well. So I love all of these great tools and tips, and I love your book as well. So thank you for sharing all of that. As we wrap up today's podcast, if there is one thing that you could encourage our listeners to implement in their life to provide more inner peace and happiness and calmness in their life, what would be the one thing you would suggest?
It has to be self-care, and do not think of self-care as being egotistical. I hear that all the time. People think, oh, well, isn't that going to be egotistical? No, you have to take care of yourself in order to be healthy and happy and then care for others.
Well, Deborah, thanks for joining me. If our listeners want to connect with you, can you give us how to connect, where to buy your book? What's your website? Do we follow you? Give us some great information so we can connect with you, because I'm sure we're going to have lots of listeners wanting to reach out to you.
Sure. Well, I do have a YouTube channel, and so YouTube, Instagram, and my website are all my name, Deborah, Deborah, Charnes, Charnes. So those are all my website, my YouTube, and my Instagram. And then my Facebook is under my business name, which is VTHE, Namaste, when you say, Namaste, and then Counsel, Counsel.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And if you were tuning in today, thank you for tuning in and listening. And I always recommend sending this to 5 or 6 of your friends that could benefit from today's podcast. I know many of our friends could benefit from some self-love and self-care tips. Sometimes we just need some encouragement. If you know a new mom as well, this would be a great podcast. Or someone that is climbing the corporate ladder that needs to be pulled off that hamster wheel, today's podcast would be a great fit for them as well. Deborah, I want to thank you for joining me. I want to thank everybody for listening today. And I want to wish everyone a beautiful day filled with love and happiness and friendship. Thanks for listening to the Stroke It podcast today. If you want to stroke me, please consider giving me a 5-star review, sharing this podcast with 5 of your favorite friends or someone you may think could benefit from the podcast, and consider joining my collective. It's completely free for the first 30 days, and you can go to jennysfreegift.com.